Gentleman there.
I just want to pick up something that Douglas Murray said. I'd like to ask you, when you talk about the Muslims that are the problem, which Muslims are you talking about? Because you keep slipping in your language to focus on the radicals, the extremists. Okay, right. Maybe that's because that's what you're interested in. But there's another whole set of Muslims out there who are not like that.
Okay.
Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. Hope you are feeling good. Today we are going to be checking out a video where Douglas Murray engaged in a debate with Tariq Ramadan and other Muslim scholars on the topic, is Europe failing its Muslim? I believe this is going to be an interesting one. Let's check it out. Go.
Welcome to Cadogan Hall here in central London for this Intelligence Squared debate, coming to you in association with the British Council. The motion, Europe is failing its Muslims. Well, although we're focusing on Muslims in Europe, this is a topic which is relevant right throughout the world. And we have a panel of some of the most provocative and stimulating speakers on this subject, and there'll be plenty of disagreement. And we'll be hearing later from our audience. So our panel, for the motion, Tariq Ramadan and Petra Steenan, and arguing against the motion, Douglas Murray and Fleming Rose. That's our panel. Welcome to you all. All right, so let's hear our panellists make their opening statements. So, first, for the motion, Europe is failing its Muslims, Tariq Ramadan. Now, he is Professor of Contemporary Islamic Studies at Oxford University. He's been taught by some of the best Muslim scholars in the world, but he's also very active at the grassroots level. He is President of the European Muslim Network. Tariq Ramadan, your time starts now.
Thank you. Let me start by saying that we are living in a difficult situation. If you listen to what is said in the European countries, the perception is very bad. 75%, for example, French people are associating Islam with violence. The perception is that Islam is a problem and that Muslims are creating problems. They are not really perceived at home in Europe. Every single European society has its own debates, its own controversies around the Muslim presence. The first one is the way Europe is defining itself. The current discourse and the general discourse is that Muslims are not European citizens. We have millions of Muslims that are already Europeans. And this is the situation when we speak about Turkey, for example. It's as if we are speaking about people who are coming from outside, not acknowledging the fact that we already have Europeans that are Muslims in our country. Not only this, on the geographical dimension, it's as if when we speak about Europe, we speak about Western Europe. Eastern Europe is not there. The Muslims who are being Europeans for generations and centuries are not perceived as Europeans. The Bosnian people are not Europeans. It's as if because they are Muslims, they are less Europeans. Our politicians, very often they speak about their fellow citizens as if they don't know who are these new citizens who are Muslim and they are living with them. It's as if these new citizens are problematic because of their religion, but not citizens as to their status. And this is where we have this confusion. We speak about cultural and we Islamize the socio-economic problems. Muslims in our societies are facing unemployment, discrimination and racism, and it's not because they are Muslims, it's because they are facing class discrimination, segregation, and wrong social policies. At the cultural level, it's as if the new visibility of the Muslims is just showing that they don't want to integrate. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. The opposite, they are visible. Millions are visible. It means that they are at home. So when you have mosques, when you have organizations, it's not because you don't want to integrate. It's exactly the opposite. You feel at home, you build your mosque, and even this, it's also a very important point in the reality. So it's the opposite. When it comes to food, curry, and couscous, that's fine. When it comes to money, Islamic banking, that's fine. But when it comes to dresses, when it comes to color, when it comes to something which is different, it's not fine. So we are selective in our integration. Money and food, welcome. Colors and dresses, no. So, last point. Last point, when it comes to the media, it's as if here we are only dealing with problems and we are dealing with these controversies every day. We are talking about violence, the minarets, the headscarves, all the problems, not talking about what is done at the grassroots level, the positive actions of the Muslims, the presence. Millions are silent and are constructive and contributing to the reality of our country. And let me say something which is important. The Muslims are understanding the West and Europe much better than before. They are understanding and rediscovering their religion much better than before. And I would say, yes, I'm supporting this motion because today we are failing, but it's a question of time, because what I see at the grassroots level is much more positive than what is happening today in our political discourse, media coverage. Things are very important behind. This is what I call the silent revolution, but we need time and it will be coming. Thank you.
Well, a very passionate and fluent opening there to our debate. Against the motion is Douglas Murray. He is the director of the Centre for Social Cohesion here in Britain, which tries to promote integration between Britain's ethnic minorities and the wider population, and it specialises in radicalisation. So, Douglas Murray, your time starts now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Tariq says that Europeans associate Islam with violence. There is some truth in that. There is also a very obvious reason for that, which is that Islam is associated with violence. It was not Buddhists who flew planes into the Twin Towers. It was not Hindus or Jews that blew up the London Underground buses a few years ago. And that simple fact has to be acknowledged if you're even going to start a dialogue. Now, what is happening, ladies and gentlemen, it's not a pantomime. I'd argue that Europe has done not too badly, considering the circumstances. In the middle of the last century, there was an almost negligible Muslim presence in Europe. At the turn of the 21st, in Western Europe alone, there were 15 to 17 million Muslims. That's a very fast migration, ladies and gentlemen, one of the fastest in human history. And no society would find it easy to deal with that kind of migration. As it happens, European societies, Western European societies have, I think, dealt with this much better than some would. Certainly, Muslims coming to live in Britain and in Western Europe enjoy more rights and better rights, among them freedom of worship, than they do in any Islamic country in the earth here today. We do have a problem. We have a problem when the failures of Islam throughout the world, the failures of all Islamic societies, come here into Britain. Their intolerance of freedom of conscience, their intolerance of apostates, their intolerance of freedom of expression and freedom of speech, their intolerance of minorities, other religious minorities, sexual minorities, their intolerance of gays, their dislike and distrust of half of the population, women, and many, many other things. And the call, what's more, for a parallel legal system within Britain and European societies. This is monstrous. No other group behaves like this, asks for parallel laws. This is a fundamental problem, and it's one we're going to have to deal with. It's a problem between a society, Western Europe, that believes that laws are based on reason, and Islam that believes that they are based on revelation. Between these two ideas, I'm not sure there is very much compromise for Europe. It is not Europe that has let down its Muslims, but the Muslims of Europe that have let down Europe. This is not solely something which we have to say we can never reconcile. Of course we can reconcile this, but we need to be honest about it. We need to be frank about it, and we cannot avoid things just because they are unpleasant. And if there were one thing I would wish Muslims in Europe could learn today, as fast as possible, it would be this: that you have no right in this society not to be offended. You have no right to say that because you don't like something, you can commit violence, or you would like something to be stopped or censored. You have no right to have more hate laws, or hate crime laws, or hate speech laws, just to defend Islam. You have to realize, the Muslims of Europe have to realize, that a society in which even your deepest feelings can be trodden upon is the only society worth living in. And the sooner we can learn that, the sooner that Islam can learn that within Europe, the better. It is not Europe that has failed its Muslims. It is Islam that has failed Europe. I'd argue Islam has failed its Muslims. Thank you.
Well, you certainly stirred things up a bit there, didn't you, Douglas Murray? Thank you very much indeed. OK, well, let me invite some comments from the floor, and let's go to the lady there. Yeah.
I just had a question to a few questions to Mr. Murray. I don't think it's the Muslims of Europe that have failed, the Muslims of Europe that have failed Europe. I think it's exactly the opposite. One of the things you said, it was actually a few Muslims, crazy Muslims, I think, who sort of flew the plane into those buildings. But was Hitler a Muslim by any chance? Because I'm not sure that Muslims had anything to do with the Holocaust.
OK. Gentleman there.
In 2009, the Centre for Muslim Studies, along with the Gallup poll, interviewed 500 British Muslims. Over 99.5% of those British Muslims found homosexual acts unacceptable. What was interesting is that the government has given concession to Muslims as well as other religious organisations. So it seems to me, in fact, this government here is prepared to give religious organisations, including Muslims, the rights over lots of gay men and women.
You talked about how Europe has dealt with this problem, and what you basically have alluded to in the 6 minutes that you had are that Muslims are a problem. And you're from the organisation called the Centre for Social Cohesion, and it's worrying that to have you talk about these things in this manner. What you are basically alluding to is that Muslims are external to Europe, and it's worrying that you see it that way, because then that means there is no chance of there being any solution to any problem, or Muslims being seen as a part of Europe and being seen as European citizens. Thank you.
Gentleman there.
I just want to pick up something that Douglas Murray said. I'd like to ask you, when you talk about the Muslims that are the problem, which Muslims are you talking about? Because you keep slipping in your language to focus on the radicals, the extremists.
Right.
Maybe that's because that's what you're interested in. But there's another whole set of Muslims out there who are not like that.
OK, just a quick clutch there. Yeah.
It is sufficient to point out that Europe is not failing its Muslims, that this debate is...
Oh, wow. What an interesting debate. We can all tell it was a little bit heated. Based on the motion, Europe is failing its Muslim. I think based on the fact that Douglas stated about Europe is not failing its Muslim, but Islam is failing Europe, based on the fact Douglas stated. And you know, Douglas always talk about Islamic extremism. Douglas always talk about Islamist fundamentalists, that a lot of those people, they come into Europe, they come into Britain, and they fail to integrate. They fail to integrate. And as a result, they cause a lot of problem because they fail to integrate. We all know immigrants coming into a country can bring a lot of economic benefits to the host country if they are to integrate effectively. We also understand that when immigrants fail to integrate, fail to accept the culture of the host country, fail to accept the tradition of the host country, fail to accept the values of the host country, they can bring a lot of harm to the host country. Because I believe you coming into a country, you should be able to adjust yourself to accommodate the host country's culture, to accommodate the host country belief, to accommodate the host country value system. You shouldn't come into a country and try to impose your own culture, or try to impose your own belief, or try to impose your own value system on the host culture. I feel that is totally wrong. If you believe the culture, the tradition, the value of the host country doesn't align with your culture, doesn't align with your tradition, doesn't align with your value system, you can go live in another country that you believe their culture, their value system, their tradition align with yours, instead of trying to impose your own culture or impose your own belief on the people. Just like Douglas have stated in this video, that a lot of people, they fail to integrate, and as a result of that, they cause a lot of harm to the country, which is not supposed to be so. I believe that's the reason why Douglas is saying it's not Europe that has failed, it's Muslim, but rather it's Islam that has failed Europe. And based on the fact he mentioned, all tell a lot of those people they misinterpret the Quran, and they tend to use the Quran to justify their actions, which I believe that is totally wrong. They become easily offended when people say things against their belief or against the founder of their belief. They tend to be easily offended. And at the end of the day, they resort to violence. And I believe that is not the answer. Violence has no place in any society. If someone says something that you feel is against your belief, is against your culture, is against your value system, you should be able to challenge the person in a dialogue and try to prove your points to the person instead of resorting to violence. I believe that's one of the reasons Douglas is saying that Islam is associated with violence. And I've really learned a lot just by listening to Douglas and Tariq Ramadan. I would also like to hear your view based on this debate. Is Europe failing as Muslim, or is it Islam that is failing Europe? Kindly leave a comment. Don't forget, click on the subscribe button, click on the like button. Do have a nice day. Yeah.